My family kept me from seeing my grandfather one last time and tried to block my inheritance, but what he had prepared for me left them stunned. The old wooden door creaked open before I even had a chance to knock. My grandmother stood there, thinner than I remembered, but her eyes were as cold as early morning frost on stone. "So now you remember the way home." Her voice didn't waver, but there was nothing familiar left in it. I froze. The words I'd prepared vanished from my tongue. "Grandma," I heard. "Grandpa passed. They told me you were in a nursing home. I don't understand." "Don't," she cut me off, raising a frail hand to her chest as if to block me both physically and emotionally. "He called you over and over right before he passed. He asked, 'Where's Emma?' You were the one he loved most, and where were you?" My chest tightened. "Can I see the number he called?" "Please, Grandma." She looked at me for a long second, then turned without a word. A few minutes later, she returned, holding a small notebook, her hands trembling as she flipped to the last page. There it was, a string of digits in Grandpa's familiar slanted handwriting. I stared, a number I didn't recognize. "Not mine. I've never used this number," I whispered, my voice caught in my throat. "I've had the same one since I was 16. Her face changed slowly. "Your parents said you changed it when you left for college. They said you didn't want to keep in touch anymore, that we embarrassed you." I sat on the porch steps. Even the wind brushing my shoulder didn't feel as cold as what I'd just heard. "Grandma, I came home last summer break. Madison opened the door and told me no one was home. I called again later, but no one picked up. Then Mom said, 'You and Grandpa were in a nursing home.'" Her face went pale. "What nursing home? We've never left this house." I clenched my fists. "They said Grandpa's funeral was today at 2 p.m. I arrived at the church by 1:30, but it was over. Everyone was already gone. She sank into the wooden chair by the door. "The service was at 10 a.m. Your mother stood there and told everyone you didn't bother to come. Madison cried, saying she'd tried everything to reach you, and you just avoided it all. The ground beneath me might as well have disappeared. Died, thinking I abandoned him. I broke down. The tears came without warning. Grandma pulled me into her arms, bony, trembling, but still the safest place I'd ever known. I let myself lean into her, something I hadn't done since childhood, and we just sat there, the wind carrying our quiet sobs out into the silence of the porch. When the tears had dried, she took out her phone and began dialing. Slow, deliberate. I didn't catch everything she said. "Only this, Claire, I need you to come here. Bring Brandon and Madison too, right now. No, it can't wait. It's about his will." Then she turned to me, her voice firm again. "They'll be here within an hour. Stay in the kitchen until I call you. Don't come out early." I nodded. My head was full of questions, but I knew staying silent now was the only way to stand on the side of truth. I sat in the quiet kitchen, my hands wrapped around the warm tea Grandma had just made, but I couldn't feel the heat. My memory opened like a dusty notebook. Each page marked by another time I'd been quietly pushed out of the family's world. Last spring, while the whole campus buzzed with plans for break, I'd booked a ride home to surprise my grandparents. I didn't tell anyone. I just wanted to see Grandpa's eyes light up the way they always did when he was caught off guard. I even brought his favorite ginger cookies, the ones he once said were just the right kind of funny with pistachios in the middle. But when I knocked, it wasn't him or Grandma who answered. It was Madison. She stood there in a pricey knit sweater, staring at me like I was a delivery person with the wrong address. "Emma, no one's home." I smiled lightly. "That's fine, I can wait. Maybe they just went to the store." Madison raised her eyebrows, stepped outside, and shut the door behind her. "They don't live here anymore. They moved to a nursing home. Guess you've been too busy to notice." I froze. "What nursing home?" She shrugged. "Some long name. I forgot. Down near Southern Edgefield, I think." She folded her arms, completely unbothered. "They don't really want to see anyone anyway. Grandpa's mind's going and Grandma's not doing great either. But Mom never said anything," I murmured. Madison gave a sharp, cold laugh. "Well, now you know." I tried asking more, but she brushed me off with, "It's not a good time," and shut the door. I stood there, stunned, holding the now cold bag of cookies in both hands. I called Mom. She picked up after 3 rings, sounding rushed. "Grandma and Grandpa moved. Emma, they needed special care. I was going to tell you next week, but you've been so busy with school. I didn't want to distract you. I asked for the name of the place. She dodged it. I asked for the address. She said they were under lockdown, no visitors allowed. I remember that feeling like being blocked by glass, seeing everything, touching nothing. I went back to school. But night after night, I kept asking myself, why didn't they tell me sooner? Were they really in a nursing home, or was something being hidden? Then one Tuesday morning, my phone rang while I was prepping a lab experiment. Mom's name appeared on the screen. I answered. Emma, she said flatly. Grandpa passed away last night. His funeral is Thursday at 2 p.m. Don't be late. I dropped the pipette in my hand. The entire room fell silent. I don't even remember how I left the building. That night, I booked the earliest trip home. Thursday came. I dressed early and arrived at the church by 1:30, my heart pounding with grief. But the parking lot was empty. I pushed the door open and found only a janitor mopping near the altar. Excuse me. The funeral for Mr. Thomas Evans. He looked up, confused. That ended at 10 m.m. Ma M. The family left before noon. I stood frozen. I called my mom, my hands trembling. She picked up immediately, her voice tinged with disappointment. Emma, I told you it was 10. You must have gotten the time wrong. No, I nearly shouted. You clearly said 2 p.m. I wrote it down right after the call. Silence. Then my dad's voice came in, calm but distant. Either way, your grandmother is very upset. She doesn't want to see anyone. You should go back to school. I didn't respond. I don't remember hanging up, only that my feet carried me straight to Cypress Street, where my grandparents' house still stood behind the white fence. I rang the doorbell. A long silence. Then the door creaked open. It was Grandma. I moved to hug her, but she stepped back. Her face was no longer the refuge of kindness I'd always known. Her eyes were red, but there were no more tears, just quiet disappointment. And I knew then everything they had hidden. The calls that never reached me, the funeral rescheduled without notice, the nursing home lie, had worked. Grandpa had died believing I'd forgotten him. Her silence that day hurt more than any accusation. I sat in the familiar kitchen, the one that used to smell of cinnamon whenever Grandpa baked on weekends. Now it was quiet, except for the ticking of the old pendulum clock, marking time until the truth would finally be revealed. Grandma sat across from me, her thin fingers wrapped around a cup of tea that had long gone cold. After a long silence, she set the cup down and pulled out her phone. This is Rose Evans. Call Claire, Brandon, and Madison. It's about Thomas's will. No, not next week. This afternoon. Spencer the lawyer will be here too. She ended the call. Her tone remained steady, but her eyes couldn't hide the pain. I looked at her and gently asked, "Do you believe me?" She didn't answer right away. It wasn't until she stood up and placed her hand on my shoulder that she spoke. No one can bear the truth forever, and I think it's time we bring it into the light. Around 4 p.m., the doorbell rang. Following Grandma's instructions, I stayed in the kitchen. The door was slightly ajar, just enough for me to hear everything. From Madison's heels clicking on the floor to Mom's forced chuckle, I recognized every sound, but they no longer brought comfort. "Hi, Mom," my mother called out. "What's so urgent?" I was at the stylist prepping for next week's event. "I hope this isn't about Emma," Madison added quickly. "Everyone knows she has nothing to do with this family anymore." I heard Grandma pull out a chair. Then her voice rang out, steady and sharp. "Sit down. Spencer is here to read Thomas's will." A pause followed. Then the rustling of documents, the click of a briefcase opening. I held my breath. "This is the last will and testament of Mr. Thomas Evans," Mr. Spencer began. "Drafted 3 months ago, legally notarized and witnessed. Per his wishes, this reading requires the presence of his 2 children, Claire Evans and Brandon Evans, as well as his 2 granddaughters, Madison and Emma." The air outside the kitchen shifted instantly. "Emma." My mother nearly hissed. I stood, gently pushed the kitchen door open, and stepped into the living room. The room fell into stunned silence. Madison froze, her phone slipping from her hand onto the couch. My dad stared at me as if he'd seen a ghost, and my mother, her expression shifted in a heartbeat, then quickly molded back into her usual polite smile. "Emma, what are you doing here?" I stood tall, didn't answer her, and looked directly at Mr. Spencer. "Grandpa wanted all 4 of us here. Now I am." Mr. Spencer nodded. "Then I'll continue." He started with the basics. The house was to be passed down to Mrs. Rose Evans, along with a separate sum allocated solely for her use. That part wasn't surprising. The next section, Mr. Spencer said, concerns an additional asset, a biotechnology research center that was recently completed, located on the east side of the city. Full ownership and operational rights are transferred to his granddaughter, Emma Evans. No one spoke until Madison suddenly jumped up, pushing her chair back. "What?" she screamed. "He left it to her? A multi-million-dollar facility to some dorm-dwelling kid?" Grandma remained seated, her hand resting on a sealed envelope. "As for the remaining assets," Mr. Spencer continued, "they will be split equally between Emma and Madison. This includes company shares and the savings accounts." "This is unfair," Madison shouted. "I was the one always there for him. I visited him every week and she just vanished." My mother turned to me, her voice sharp. "You heard it. Your sister is the one who deserves it. You should know your place. Don't ruin everything." Grandma stood up, took the envelope from the drawer, and handed it to the lawyer. "Read the final part, Spencer. Thomas's letter." Mr. Spencer carefully pulled out the folded paper and read aloud. "If Emma is present when this will is read, it means the truth has finally reached the one who deserves to know it. I'm sorry for what I couldn't protect you from, but this research center is for you, the granddaughter who reignited my passion for science. I know you'll do better with it, no matter how many times others tried to bury you." I stood still, not because he left everything to me, but because he knew. He had known the truth all along, and he chose to put justice into every line of his will. The room felt frozen after Spencer finished reading Grandpa's final words. I could hear my heart beating, quiet but steady. Madison stood motionless for a few seconds, then suddenly kicked her chair back, her voice breaking into a scream. "No, this can't be happening. Everything was supposed to be mine. I worked so hard this whole year." "Madison," my mother hissed. But it was too late. Madison had lost control. "I did everything according to Mom's plan. I pretended to be the good daughter, took care of Grandpa, took him to appointments, read the Bible to him just so he'd leave it all to me. And Emma, she disappeared for 2 years without a word." I clenched my fists. I thought hearing that would hurt, but it didn't. Only a quiet emptiness settled, making way for clarity. My dad, who had stayed silent all along, finally spoke, his voice uncertain. Madison, what are you saying?" "You think I enjoyed visiting those depressing nursing homes?" Madison scoffed bitterly. "It was all for the inheritance. I did exactly what Mom told me, and now I get half while Emma gets an entire research facility." My mother turned to me, her eyes calculating. "Emma, you know, running a research center is complicated. You're still in school. How would you even manage it? If you agree, we could transfer ownership, sell it, and split the money." I looked at her, and for the first time in my life, I wasn't afraid. "That was Grandpa's gift to me. It's not for sale." Madison laughed bitterly, her voice full of scorn. "You think you deserve it? You ignored him when he was sick. You didn't even show up at the funeral. Everyone thinks you're heartless." I replied quietly, but loud enough for everyone to hear. "They think that because you created that story." Madison opened her mouth to argue, but Grandma cut in, her voice so firm I barely recognized it. "Enough, Madison. You had your chance to choose kindness, but you chose manipulation just like your parents chose to push Emma out of this family." No one said a word. Grandma stood, still holding the folded letter tightly. Thomas saw everything clearly. He wasn't a fool. He left the research center to Emma, not just out of affection, but because he believed in her abilities, her character, and her honesty. Madison collapsed back into her seat, face pale. My mother stayed quiet. My father stared at the floor, avoiding everyone's eyes. I couldn't tell if I was shaking from anger or because finally the truth had spoken for itself. Mr. Spencer stood and gathered the documents. As stated in the will, the assets are now officially allocated. All parties may request a copy starting tomorrow. If there are no legal disputes, transfers will be completed within 7 business days. I walked toward Grandma and took the hand she offered. She looked at me, her eyes still pained, but not as cold as they had been this morning. "Can I keep Grandpa's letter?" I asked. "Of course," she said softly, giving my hand a gentle squeeze. "He wrote it for you." Madison glared at me, her eyes burning. "You don't deserve that center. You don't deserve any of it." I turned to face her and said slowly, "You're partly right. I wouldn't deserve it if I became the version of myself this family tried to force me to be." I didn't look back once as I left the living room, clutching the letter tightly in my hand. The door closed behind me like a final punctuation mark to all the years I was treated as an outsider in my own home. I still held the letter when Spencer left, leaving behind a room filled with tense silence. Grandma remained seated, quietly staring out the window like she was trying not to erupt. My mother leaned back in her chair, gripping her leather purse, while Madison's face was flushed, her eyes locked on me as if life had just handed her its greatest injustice. "I think this should end here." My father spoke up, his voice low, trying to remain calm. "Thomas left a will. We should respect that." "No," Grandma interrupted, then slowly stood up. I had never seen her like that. Gone was the quiet patience, the polite smile. Only sharp eyes and trembling hands from anger remained. "Emma, hand me that letter," she said, her voice raspy but unwavering. I gave it to her, feeling her fingers tighten around it. She opened it, every movement slow and deliberate, as if peeling away years of deception layered over this family. "He didn't just write to you," she said. "Thomas wrote to all of us." Then she read it aloud, line by line, not skipping a single detail. "Rose, if you're holding this letter, it means the truth has finally come to light. I'm no longer here to say it, so I write. I love both of my granddaughters, but I'm not blind. Emma is a remarkable child. At 8 years old, she asked me about cell structures and created a coin cleaner from lemon and baking soda. But because of that brilliance, she was abandoned by the very people who were supposed to love her most. Claire always said she was too different, hard to connect with, and Brandon just stayed silent. Madison was smart enough to be praised and always protected. But Emma, every achievement was seen as showing off. I glanced at my mother. She was stiff, lips pressed into a hard line. I saw the times Emma did Madison's homework and got scolded for not helping fast enough. I heard Claire call her a weirdo and Brandon laugh along. "Do you remember that night after the science fair when Emma cried alone in the kitchen? Because no one at home asked her how she felt. Only you and I, just us, gave her space to be herself. What do I call that, Rose? I call it poison. And this family let it seep into every dinner, every word, every look." Madison clenched her fists, but said nothing. Grandma kept reading, her voice slightly trembling, but steady. "I don't write this to guilt anyone, but to make them face themselves. If Claire, Brandon, and Madison are hearing this, know that Emma owes you no apology. You owe her an explanation. And if you can't do that, then leave this house, the last place where kindness still lives." Grandma looked up, folded the letter with shaky hands. Then she turned to my mother and said each word with clarity. "You turned her into a stranger in her own home. You were her mother and never spent a day trying to understand her." My mother said nothing. Madison suddenly stood and turned to Grandma. "Oh, now everything is my fault. I did nothing wrong. I was the one who stayed, cared for Grandpa, took him to the hospital, read to him." "Enough," Grandma growled. "You did those things because you expected an inheritance, not out of love." "You don't have the right to say that," Madison shouted. "I did what my mother taught me, and that's exactly why you turned out this way." The room fell silent. I stood by the table saying nothing. I didn't need to. Grandpa had already said it all. "Claire, Brandon, Madison," Grandma said, her voice low and cold like the late afternoon sky. "Thomas made it clear in his letter. If you can't respect his wishes, then leave. This house has no place for deceit." My father stood first, eyes down, walking toward the door without a word. My mother rose after him, not saying anything either, just looking at me for a long moment. Her eyes weren't cold anymore, just empty. Madison was last, standing still for a few seconds before turning away. The door closed behind them. A breeze slipped in through the window, brushing gently across my face. I looked at Grandma. She wiped her eyes and gave a faint smile. He always knew how to end things at just the right moment. That night, after the last door shut behind the family who had always treated me like an outsider, I sat alone on the porch bench. The wind rustled through the oak tree out front, carrying the earthy scent from a light afternoon rain. In the quiet darkness, old memories slowly drifted in like smoke weaving through my mind. I had always been the strange child in their eyes. While Madison dreamed of becoming a ballerina and got driven to weekend classes by Mom, I sat for hours on the kitchen floor building simple electric circuits with straws, copper wire, and AA batteries using books Grandpa had found at the city library. I didn't care for dolls. I liked experimenting with baking soda, vinegar, and the mercury thermometer Grandpa got from an old medical supply store. But every time I showed off a project, Dad would glance over and ask, "Did you break any outlets this time?" Mom would say, always with these weird little games. "Can you just talk like a normal person?" Madison always knew how to make things fit the narrative Mom wanted. She had her 8th birthday at a fancy Italian restaurant, complete with a 3-tiered cake and a kids' choir performance. My 9th birthday was held in the kitchen corner, with a small cake Grandma baked, and only Grandma and Grandpa were there to celebrate. Back then, I wasn't sad. I was just confused. Why did Mom only see Madison? Why, when I was chosen by my teacher to represent our school at the district science fair, did Mom just sigh and not ask me a single question? I still remember the first time my teacher called Mom in for a private meeting. Ms. Reynolds, the only person at school who understood that I needed to study more, dig deeper, not because I was showing off, but because I genuinely needed space to grow. "She's exceptionally capable," Ms. Reynolds said. "We're recommending Emma for the regional gifted program. We should file the paperwork as soon as possible." Mom stared at the bulletin board like the teacher had just insulted our family honor. "How long does this program last?" she asked, voice dry. Ms. Reynolds explained. "It includes advanced classes, lab work, and a personal project. It's completely free." Mom folded the papers. "Our family doesn't have any special needs. She's still young. She should learn to blend in, not live in a world of differences." I was sitting outside the meeting room. I heard every word. That evening, I ate dinner silently, not asking any more questions. But Grandma was different. She went to school the next day with the same application packet I'd seen Mom fold and tuck away. Grandma walked straight into the principal's office, her eyes shining like headlights in a rainy night. I'd never seen her that fierce. "I consent for my granddaughter to join the program," she said. "I'm her legal academic guardian." "But you're not the primary parent." The principal started to object, but she pulled out a notarized document. I don't know how she managed it, but it had Mom's full signature from a prior legal authorization. I was accepted and the world opened up. Stepping into that lab felt like entering a world I had only dreamed about, where curiosity wasn't strange but celebrated. I had teachers who encouraged me to share ideas instead of cutting me off with, "Can you just say that shorter?" Back then, I believed that effort alone would earn me recognition, but every time I came home with an award or a state-level result, Mom would change the topic to how Madison just landed a test shoot for a local jewelry brand. She looked so striking, Mom said, her eyes gleaming with a pride I had never seen directed at me. I learned to smile politely at the comparisons. I learned to buy myself a candy bar when I won first place instead of waiting for anyone to ask. I learned not to expect a "I'm proud of you" from Mom because I knew it would never come. And now, sitting once again in this house where Grandpa once secretly installed extra outlets so I could power a pressure gauge, I felt a strange sense of calm. Turns out I never needed their approval. I just needed to be myself, and Grandpa had seen me clearly from day one. 5 years have passed since the day his will was read in that old living room. I'm 26 now, and every morning I walk into the building called Evans Biolab. I feel an unfamiliar kind of peace, like I'm stepping into the dream Grandpa left behind for me. The research facility was once just a sketch in his notebook. He described it as a place where no one has to apologize for being curious. And now it's a fully operational applied biotech lab focused on environmental innovation. We're not a $100 million facility, but every member of our team was chosen by me and trusted by me. There's Sarah, my former classmate who pulled all-nighters with me in college. Miguel, a software engineer from Oregon who helped build our first automated sample measuring system. And many other young researchers, people rejected from big-name projects for not having Ivy League credentials. I don't let that decide who's worthy. And Grandma is still by my side. Every week, she visits the lab, bringing muffins she learned to bake at her senior center and a thick notebook. She enrolled in an introductory science course at the community college just a few blocks from our house. I don't want to listen to you talk and feel like I'm hearing bird chatter, she laughs. At the very least, I should know what your enzymes are doing. Whenever I present our findings to the research board, she's always the first to comment. You talked too fast at the beginning. Let them see that you believe in what you're doing. Somehow, her feedback grounds me more than any hollow praise ever could. We live in my grandparents' old house. I converted the backyard shed into a reading nook for Grandma, where afternoon sunlight streams through the wooden window, casting a gentle golden glow. That room has only one photo on the wall. It's a picture of me at age 7 holding a test tube and oversized gloves. Grandpa is leaning down, adjusting my safety goggles while I beam with joy. On the back of the photo, in his bold handwriting, it says, "My little scientist will change the world." I had it framed. It hangs in the most visible spot in the house. Whenever I feel tired, I look up, reread that sentence, and remember that Grandpa never asked me to be like anyone else. As for the people I once called my parents, they haven't contacted me since the reading of the will. I didn't block their numbers or change my email. I just never responded. Each year I still receive a Christmas card from them with a photo of Madison and her husband in their new apartment in San Diego. The handwritten note on the back always says the same thing. Hope one day you understand that family isn't something you choose. I never write back because I already made my choice. I choose kindness. I choose honesty. I choose the people who see me not as defective for being different, but as someone worthy of love. With all my edges, I used to think I needed their validation to feel whole. But I realized I only needed one person to truly believe in me, and Grandpa did. So did Grandma. Today I stood in the research facility Grandpa left behind and signed a partnership agreement with a group of public high schools to donate lab equipment and offer research opportunities to students like I once was. Bright, curious, and lacking an advocate. Before leaving the office, I opened a drawer and took out a note Grandpa had written during my last visit to him in the hospital. The handwriting was shaky but clear. When you step into your own world, don't let anyone tell you that you don't. I smiled. Last week, I received a letter. Not from a court or a bank, not from people who once cut me off but still send token holiday cards. It was a handwritten letter. The paper slightly yellowed, the ink a bit shaky, sent from a nursing home in the neighboring state. The writer was Mr. George, Grandpa's best friend from college, who worked with him on research in the 1970s. In the letter, he recounted an evening when he and Grandpa sat in the backyard and I was just 8 years old. Grandpa had said, "Little Emma isn't like anyone else, and that's the best part." Near the end, Mr. George wrote, "Thomas always believed you would live a life not meant to please others, but to walk your own path, and if you're reading this, it means you're already on it." I folded the letter and placed it in the wooden box where I keep my most treasured memories. Grandpa's will, the photo of him adjusting my goggles, and a piece of his old lab coat that Grandma saved, reminding me that science has a heart too. There was no need for tears. The ache had finally quieted. One Saturday afternoon, I walked back from the outdoor research station near Lake Alton. Along the way, I saw 2 kids crouched by a tree, stirring dirt and water in a plastic cup with a twig. One of them said, "If we add sand, maybe it'll start boiling." I chuckled and approached gently. "What are you experimenting with?" They turned around, surprised, not scared. A curly-haired kid said, "We're trying to make a mini volcano like the one on that science show." I knelt beside them, rolling up my sleeves. "I've got baking soda and vinegar in my office. Want to make it real?" Their eyes lit up. 10 years ago, I was that kid sitting on a kitchen floor using a straw instead of a spoon, listening to fizzy reactions that no one praised. Now I get to reach out to other curious kids to give them a place where they can fail safely, ask questions freely, and never be laughed at for wondering. And that makes me feel like I'm living exactly the way Grandpa believed I could. At the end of the day, I returned home. Grandma was in the living room reading. On the table sat a fresh batch of banana muffins she'd baked. "I reviewed the lecture on enzymes again," she said, smiling. "Harder than I thought." I sat beside her, handed her a cup of tea, and rested my head on her shoulder for a moment. "You know, I've never said it, but everything I have today is because of you and Grandpa." She said nothing, just squeezed my hand a little tighter. "No, Emma," she finally whispered. "Everything you have is because you deserve it. I just walked beside you like he always did. Forgiveness isn't something I'm waiting for, especially not from those who reshaped love into silence. And if anyone out there is chasing approval from a place that never embraced you, know that you have the right to choose again. You have the right to walk away from what hurts, even if it's labeled blood. I don't have a perfect family, but I have something whole. The belief that I am enough. I am Grandpa's little scientist, the one who will change the world with her own hands, and a faith no one can dim. Emma's story reminds us that a person's true worth isn't defined by those who abandon them, but by their courage to pursue what's right, even in loneliness. Family doesn't have to be blood. Sometimes it's the people who listen, protect, and believe in us when no one else does. In a world still full of judgment, Emma represents those brave enough to be themselves, to choose again, and to rewrite the definition of love and worth.